What's up, you guys? We just finished Ask Alex number 31. And as always, we were diving into a touchy subject, talking about tenants. Alex, are you afraid of buying properties with tenants?
No, I'm not, Will. But let me tell you this. You need to know a couple very important things when you're buying properties with tenants. You need to understand these top five things, which is number one, how long have they been in the property? Number two, what kind of lease do they have in place, or are they on month to month? Number three is you want to make sure, are they currently paying or not? And if you want to see the rest of the two, make sure you watch the rest of this video.
What's up? What's up, my deal makers? Let's get you guys started today. See where my man Will is. Get him on the screen. Super excited about today's webinar, you guys. We're gonna cover the nitty gritty of dealing with tenants, and I have a lot of experience dealing with tenants. How's everybody doing today? Hope everybody had a great 4th of July. I sure did. I had an amazing barbecue. We're actually going to go into 5 different examples of properties that we've purchased with tenants, and you guys are going to see where things are at. So everybody can chat. Make sure that you guys are always putting in your information inside of the chat so we can continue to network. There he is. But yeah, we're going to cover a lot of ground here, you guys. Dealing with tenants is a very important skill. I've been talking about this forever, or I've mentioned it before, but developing the skill of negotiating with tenants is extremely important. What's up, my man, Will?
Yes, sir. Tenant negotiation, man. I've been dealing with it this week on a couple properties, and I know it's very helpful having your guidance and getting through some of those. And I know you've been dealing with it this week out on the islands as well, right? So it's something that is going to come up regularly if you're acquiring properties. It's a good skill to have, right?
Absolutely. You got to continue to expand your tool belt as an investor, and this is another tool that you need to have. So I'm really excited to share with the gang, with the tribe, so you guys can begin to use it and just not be afraid of buying a property with tenants, as long as it meets certain criteria. You can't be afraid to buy a property if you know that what the more than likely what the outcome could be. So that's why I think it's important that we cover this subject, because now we've seen that on deals that were successful. We have seen that now on deals that we're rehabbing, and then now we're seeing it on deals that we're purchasing as well. Just the ins and outs, but there are some things that you see in common, and we're going to give you guys as much as possible to help you guys be able to use this tool in your investor's tool belt. You hear that, rooster?
Yeah, you can tell Alex is back in Maui when you hear the roosters. So, Alex, just a quick question before we even dive into things. Like, would you say at all that you're intimidated by tenants?
Not at all, not at all. I'm a little scrappy though, and I'm gritty, and I'm a bit of a fighter myself. Maybe it's because I grew up very underprivileged, and you have to be that way if you feel like you're gonna come up in life. But more than anything, I've been a tenant. I am still a tenant, and I understand the laws and the rights of tenants and landlords as well. So they don't intimidate me. Yeah, some are more difficult than others, but no, I don't get intimidated by tenants anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that sometimes I'll hear investors say, "Oh, it's got tenants, I'm not looking at it." But again, that's not necessarily a deal killer for us. It's something that again, just like everything else, you buy the deal at the right price. It's something you can definitely still take advantage of. So cool, man. I know, guys, we're gonna get things kicked off here. As Alex mentioned, we're doing tenant talk today, and just kind of giving you guys some insight, what's kind of been going on in Alex's business. How he's been kind of dealing with tenants. But first, Alex, tell us about your current situation. What's going on in your life? Where are you at? I know we hear the roosters. Where are you at, brother?
Well, I'm happy to be back on Maui. Flew back literally a couple hours after last week's webinar. I was in Marina Del Rey there. And then, just back into the Maui lifestyle. I was away for 7 weeks, so I'm super happy to be back. Been surfing already, been boogie boarding. Been hitting the beach, just been hitting all my favorite spots, been saying hi to the roosters and the turtles, but just back in the flow of things, man. I'm super grateful and happy to be back. I know some people that follow me on Instagram, they comment on the stuff. It is truly paradise, just going out there to the beach, and then people, they're on vacation. You can tell they're having time of life. They're getting epic selfies and pictures of each other. And it's just a magical place. The temperature, you can pretty much swim year round. And there's just so much about it that there's not much to like dislike. And, I'm glad to be back. Also,
Alex, you've always mentioned this, like, morning routine is huge for you. So I know for you to just be kind of back home, at your place, like being able to kind of get that morning routine in, that's got to be huge as well. So
Absolutely, absolutely. Because when you travel, it's very difficult to honor your routines and your habits. Although I've gotten much better because I do travel often, it's still much easier to get into back into that routine of things when you're in your home residence. Such as what now that I call Maui home, it's just sleeping in my own bed. I know where everything's at. It's just much easier to get back into that routine. So yeah, man, thanks for making that point because it is much more difficult on the road.
And I know you're back in Maui and I'm out here in Los Angeles, but guys, please do use that chat and let us know, where you're kind of chatting in from. We'd love to kind of get an idea of where everybody's at. And Alex, what else is going on? I know we have some updates. Obviously you're back home, but what's kind of going on with the project that you have out there in Maui? I know that was kind of one of the big reasons you came back out, right?
Yeah, so we bought the property at the beginning of May. We bought the property with actually 3 different tenants. There was, and so we've been negotiating with them throughout this time, and we were able to relocate 2 of the tenants officially, and one of the second tenant was going to be moving out on July 1st, and that's why I flew back so I could meet with that tenant in person. I had to give them $10,000 in relocation costs, in addition to refunding their deposit. So I gave her a check for $11,500, so she could, and free rent for about 50 days. So it wasn't inexpensive, but because of the juice in the deal, or because of the profit margins of the deal, that we had a budget of $35,000 for this deal, and it looks like we're going to be right there at $34,000 to get this deal done. The other tenant, now I'd like to say that right as I'm done with this webinar, I'm going to go over there, get them to sign this agreement, and they're the third tenant, and so they're going to be leaving by the 16th of this month of July, it appears, and they found a place to relocate, and they're getting $20,000. I know that sounds like a lot of money, but when you're buying property in over $1 million, that's really not not that much money, given how much profit we could potentially make on this deal. So that's that I'm really excited about that. I'm also going to be able to have a vacant property here in Maui that's like 3,700 square feet. So we're going to throw some meetups. We're gonna, some get-togethers. I'm gonna be hanging out over there. I'm helping manage the rehab before I, leave off island at the end of close to the end of this month. So I'm just growing. I'm learning myself because I'm having to call contractors, get bids, and do this. This is different market that I'm used to. So it might seem like it's super cool, but it's also a growing pains for me because I've never actually rehabbed a property or done some form of rehab here on Maui. And then also we just got possession, or we just got confirmation that our other property that we have in escrow in Lancaster in the Antelope Valley, we're going to be getting that, closing on that pretty soon, right, Will?
And that was a tenant situation as well. So even though it was in escrow, we were kind of tasked with negotiating with the tenants. The seller did agree to deliver it vacant, and they were unable to kind of complete their end of the deal. But we'll kind of dive into that deal and your Maui deal a little bit more here in the call, guys, and kind of break down some specifics on each one of those, and why it was that we were kind of confident buying it. And obviously, Alex kind of alluded to it first, which is even if it's a big property, a high number, as long as you know the number that you need to budget for your cash for keys, any number is possible. You just have to, have an idea of what that is. So, Alex, I know you're back in Maui, but you were kind of flying all over the place. You've got a big podcast coming out here in a couple weeks. I know you're pretty excited about that, right?
Yeah. So last Monday, I went to Vegas, flew in and out to record the podcast with Ryan Pineda because, I did the Bigger Pockets podcast back in November, but that podcast, a lot of things have changed since then, right? We've grown the team. I've been here in Maui longer. We've got our first deal over here. We've kind of scaled the operation up in LA. And so I want to just give an update to, and also expand the reach. So I'm excited about that podcast. Keep an eye out for that, guys. We'll be sharing that, and you guys will be able to check that out and get an update. I mean, it was an amazing interview with Ryan. Also, I just want to give, credit's due. You, Will, Paul over there in Antelope Valley, Kayvon, Eliam, all the team over there just cranking in LA, making it easy for me to continue to grow, the relationships and hang out with the people that are helping us fund deals, and then, pay for coaching and training and all the stuff that's helping us continue to grow as a team. So, good job out there in LA and with everybody else out there and just cranking it. I'm really proud of you guys.
And I know that's one of the big things, about Ryan and his business and how he kind of operates is at that bigger picture level. He's kind of up there and, has a team that kind of is able to manage the day to day, which allows him to do, the lifestyle design that he's shooting for. So really cool that you got to kind of spend some time with him one on one, catch up, and kind of record that podcast. And I know everybody on the call here today, when you get a chance to listen to that, there's going to just be a ton of value in there with two of those guys that are arguably, leaders in their categories, kind of shooting it back and forth in that podcast. So let's get started and kind of dive into some conversations about some tenants, right? So Alex, for you in particular, we asked you earlier on the call, does buying properties with tenants in place intimidate you? And you said no. And to that point, we have a couple, properties currently that we're, operating with that had tenants in place. And what we're going to do on this call today, guys, is, just kind of have Alex break down property by property, what the tenant situation looked like, right? So we want to know, how long are these guys in the property for, Alex? And, a couple of the other big questions that we're going to want to, answer here. Alex is going to kind of dive into those. So Alex, starting it off, like, aside from how long they've been in the property, what are some of the most important bullet point questions that you would say, you need to know if you're buying a property with tenants in place?
Yeah. So first and foremost, what I would say is on the tenants, there's certain like criteria. Just like with, hey, what do you want to buy? Multifamily? You want to buy this size house? What's your criteria? So the criteria I look at, or the bullet points I look at whenever I'm analyzing deal, is number one, how long have they been in the property? I know we talked about that, but that's super important, because the mindset of a tenant that's been there for a year and a half and the mindset of a tenant that's been there for 20 years are completely different. So make sure that you understand how long they've been in the property. And then, do they have a lease in place, or is it month to month? Do we even have access to the old lease that they have if, it is month to month? Just what documentation will we be able to see about their tenancy? I think is just really the really important point and criteria. Because remember, you might be dealing with the wholesaler that's dealing with the out-of-state owner, and then they might be a newer wholesaler, and then they might not even have this information. You might have to guide them to get it. You might be talking to a savvy realtor that has all the information, but won't tell you the information unless you ask. So just keep in mind. So how long have they been in the property? Do they have a lease in place? Is it month to month, or where's that at? Are they paying rent right now? Like, are they paying late rent? Like, are they late payers, or are they constantly paying on time? And they're just ideal tenants. Like, what is like their rent schedule looking like? Also, what is their demographics? And what I mean by demographics is like, is this a younger, Caucasian 20s couple, that just moved in a year and a half ago, or is this like an older Hispanic, retired couple, elderly, that have been there 15 years? So it's just like, what are the demographics? Because you need to understand the people that you're going to be negotiating with. I mean, try to put yourself in their shoes. And so how can you do that if you don't know kind of what their avatar is or what their profile is? And I'm just saying it because it's just relevant in the negotiation, and then what's going to happen with you discussing with them and talking with them, because there might be someone else on your team that might be better suited to do that negotiation simply because the demographics kind of match up. Does that make sense, Will? Yeah.
Again, it's like you said, you're not going to get the same kind of conversation with somebody that's been there for a year than somebody that's been there for 5 years. You're not going to get the same conversation with somebody that is handicapped that somebody that is not, because they're going to say, well, hey, you know what? I have a handicap ramp and I really like this property. And you're going to say, you know what? I really understand that. That makes sense. You're probably not going to want to move out of there, right?
Yeah. Yep. So,
so you have to know that piece. I agree.
Yeah. And so understanding that, and there's definitely a way of going about asking that because of certain like housing laws and discrimination and all that, there's certain things, but just as an investor, you need to understand the demographics of the tenants that you're going to potentially be inheriting as much as possible. And then also, is the property under rent control? Like such as in Los Angeles County, there's actual rent control for certain properties, such as like the multifamily. So if I'm buying,
something I found on the web.
Sorry guys, that's Alexa just talking and just anyway. So is this person in a property that's officially under rent control, or is this person like, if I'm buying a house in the San Fernando Valley that's just a single family house, that is not under rent control. But if I'm buying a 4-unit property in some part of Los Angeles, like South LA, that is likely under rent control. So yeah, so there's a difference there. And the ones with rent control are actually much more difficult because it's the property itself is under rent control. And then I'm going to add, has there been, this is magic right here, this is key, guys, has there been any talks of cash for keys or relocation after the sale with the tenants? Because a lot of times I've found that people are scared to have those conversations, but the reality is people are human. They understand, hey, if the property sold, it's likely I'm going to have to talk to the new owner, and either I'm going to continue my tenancy, my rent's going to change, or I'm going to have to relocate. People know this stuff. Now, other situations, people are already hostile and they're already getting into it with the tenants. And, or there's a lot of times landlords and tenants fight. And then when you come in to buy the property, there's been a break in communication. So there might not even be that discussion. This person might be willing to leave for $1,000 or just like, a couple $1,000. And it would, and the seller, because of their, emotions, are like, I'm not going to give that person any money. They owe me rent. So, there's just like, what have the talks and the communications been like? So I think those are like the huge bullet points I think everybody should focus on when they're considering buying tenants. Let's go.
And Alex, we're going to go ahead and dive into some properties. So I'm going to share those 6 points right now. They're in the chat, and we'll kind of, dive through those questions on a couple of properties that, we're working with right now, just to give some insight on these. And before we do, Alex, we had a great question come in from Fernando in the chat. If you guys do have any chat questions today, use the chat feature, use the Q&A feature. This is about tenants, and we want to make sure you guys understand any questions you have. So Fernando is asking, what's the best way to find out if an area is under rent control? And the first thing that I would do is I would probably go to Google or call an agent in my area and ask that agent, because they're probably going to know. Would you agree, Alex?
Yes. What I would usually do is there's this website. I'm going to type it into the chat as well, called Zemus, in the LA, city of LA. I think it's zemus.org. And in there, once you type it up, the address tells you, and there's a little label that says RSO for rent stabilization ordinance, and it'll say yes or no there. But for the most part, anything in the city of LA that's official in the city of LA, because there's property that's in the county of LA that could not be in that rent stabilization ordinance. But that's how I find out. Or I just know because of that I'm investing consistently in these areas, so I know which ones are rent control, which are not. For example, the city of Hawthorne is in the city and county of LA. Well, I'm sorry, it's not in the city of LA, it's in the county of LA, but it's its own city, and it does not have any rent control. And we bought a property there with my previous mentor because of that, because it was not under rent control, and we bought it for that reason. We were inheriting tenants, but we knew that they didn't have the same, tenant rights in that property as they would if they were in the city of LA.
Cool. So let's go ahead and dive into a couple of specific properties here, Alex. Let's talk a little bit about Compton. So I know we had purchased a property down in Compton. Tenants were in place, negotiations had fallen apart with the seller. So let's start off with question number one. How long were these tenants in the property for?
So when we bought the property, we were looking to buy the property, it was towards the end of last year. And as I recall, the tenants hadn't been paying for about 3 or 4 months now. And they were tenants that were like just on Airbnb. And then they ended up like extending and doing like a 30-day rental with kind of month-to-month 30-day rental. And then the pandemic kind of hit. So I think they started renting like in April or, somewhere around there. And then they stopped paying like in somewhere like I want to say like 3 or 4 months after that. So I think it was like right around like October. So they hadn't been paying for a couple of months. And so, but I knew since it was number one, they didn't really have a long-term lease. That's another thing I forgot to mention. If they have a lease in place for say 10 months left on a 1-year lease, then I'm probably not going to buy that property unless it's such a great deal that, I could afford to hold on to a hard money loan or a higher closing or higher, holding costs, because I have to pay a higher rate. And for those whole 10 months, I have to honor that lease. There's no guarantee that I'm going to be able to give them cash for keys because they have a lease in place, and I have to honor that lease as a new owner. So that's why we were asking that question. Do they have a lease in place, or are they month to month, or, are they had a lease and then now they've gone month to month?
And,
So
and Alex, that's a unique situation, right? Because it's an Airbnb. How'd you do that?
well, it was an Airbnb. I looked at I got the lease agreement from the seller. She sent it to me, so I analyzed it, and it was just simple. Like, and I knew that right there that okay. The answer to the next question: are they paying rent? No, they weren't paying rent. They weren't in a rent control property. They were on a month to month, but they weren't paying. And then, like, what were the demographics? I think there were like a couple with a couple of kids. So I kind of knew that. And then they're not in rent control. And then, has there been any talks for cash for keys or relocation? And there hadn't been any talks because they were cooperating with the sale of the property, but then they stopped cooperating, and then threw the whole COVID thing in there as like wave. There's no way to determine from my perspective whether the seller was lying, or the tenants were lying. But basically, the tenants were using in saying that they had got COVID and they lost their jobs, and then they were kind of milking it. Or at least they were using that as the reason why they weren't paying. But the talks had broken down between the agent, the seller, and the tenant. So it was really like, that's why we got in there and we started talking to the tenant while we were in escrow, and we decided to close on it.
And so that's kind of the resolution, right? You're able to come in and say, hey, you guys aren't having this communication anymore. When you're looking for that resolution, Alex, what is it that typically these tenants are looking for?
Well, we go in there now. I think we were going to talk about a little bit later, but it's pretty simple, guys. When you're inheriting tenants, they either want time or money, one of those two things. Or if they want, if they're greedy, they want a lot of both. But usually it's a hybrid of what they wanted: a certain amount of time, and then they might need a certain amount of relocation assistance to help them get to that next place. So that's kind of like what we look at. Hey, we want to offer them something where it's reasonable. Maybe no rent for like 45 days, and then like a couple $1,000s for relocation. That's kind of probably what we usually go with, because we don't expect to go in there and get somebody out in a week, although it has happened. The one, the Compton we're talking about right now, I got them out within a week of closing the property. But this is another ninja tip. If you do decide to move forward on a deal like that, you need to kind of clear it with the seller, clear it with the agent, but you should be going in there and already trying to talk to the tenant, and then open that conversation, open that dialogue while you're in escrow, like I did with this Compton one. Number one, to get a better idea where their mind is at. Number two, to already try to strike a deal like as the deal is being closed. So there's but you do got to kind of clear with people, because you don't want to go behind people's back, the seller or the agent. But if you are buying it with tenants, then there's kind of like, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to talk to them. You've already committed, maybe you've already put a deposit in place. And so you can open that conversation and get that ball rolling.
A lot of times, like you said, you've already maybe put in your earnest money deposit. Maybe you're, reaching out to the tenants to schedule your pre-sale inspection that you're going to get done. And, maybe it just makes sense for you to be there when that inspection happens. And, hey, are you all right if I talk to the tenants when I'm there? And again, make sure that you clear it with those, with your seller or with the seller's agent, so that you're not stepping on anybody's toes. But Alex, I would say that was one of the keys to resolution for securing that Compton deal, was you being able to go in and have those negotiations with the tenant, where the agent before wasn't able to do that.
Exactly. We because we're that new party, we're someone else. Sometimes with them arguing and getting into certain type of fights and stuff like that, they don't want to talk to each other anymore. So you just go in there as a fresh person and say, hey, you know what, we're buying the property, want to know kind of what you're looking at, understand, this is what I understand the situation, but I'm just trying to get your side of the story, and just open that dialogue up is super valuable, and gives you more confidence on closing on property, and it speeds up the timeline to get a resolution with them as well.
100%. So, Compton was a property that was a little bit more local. What about Joshua Tree? Joshua Tree for us is a property that, is a little bit further out, right? So this is one that is, arguably a 2.5-hour drive from me, which means from you, it's a good flight and a 2.5-hour drive. So, for some people that would make them nervous. What was the situation like here? How long were the tenants in place?
Well, I do want to start with that, shout out to Kayvon on that deal, because he's one of the tribe members here. He was attending the webinar. He started taking a lot of action. He got that opportunity. We tried to help him buy the deal through our hard money lender, but because he's so new, he wasn't able to get the financing for that. So we ended up partnering up on the deal. But we walked him through the entire negotiation with the tenants. And what we saw there was that the guy had been there for, I think 5-6 years, Will, if I'm not mistaken.
Or yeah, 5 years, I believe.
Yeah, he'd been there for 5 years. He was paying, pretty low rent for a nice, house, but also the home values in that area kind of skyrocketed a lot over the last, 5 years, particularly 3 to 5 years. So he was on a month to month. He already gone through his lease, but he was not paying. But he did find a way to get current by getting a grant of some sort. I think he was Indian, from India,
and he applied for a tribal, forgiveness loan or something through an Indian reservation that he belonged to, is what he had said.
Yeah. So as we understood it, he stopped paying for a long period of time during COVID, and then he ended up, getting a kind of a lump sum through that assistance, and then he gave that to the seller, but then he's still not able to kind of pay, and he wasn't paying it again. And so we're like, all right, well, this guy, he's on month to month, so that's not an issue. Is he paying right now? Well, he's kind of current, but then that's part of the reason why the seller's giving us a good deal on the property, because we looked at the comps and we were getting a screaming great deal. So we're like, okay, this definitely justifies, even if this guy wants $10,000 or some crazy amount, like we'll probably be able to afford to pay him this because we're getting such a good deal on the property. So I think that was another big kicker on that one. And that, again, if the deal was tighter, maybe we wouldn't have bought it because it is farther out, but all those factors, and I think I'm going to make a video about this, or I think we're going to do a webinar about this, or both in the future, of just like how many different data points that we're considering when we're taking deals down. And they're different with tenants and without tenants, but it's still, nonetheless, we're taking a lot of data into account and making decisions based off of that. So, all right. And then what else? So were they paying?
This guy also had one situation as well, Alex. Remember, in addition to getting this Native American forgiveness loan, he was also married and had been divorced. And the wife had actually cheated on him in the property. And so he had mentioned having bad juju, bad memories, and didn't want to be in the property anymore. And so
I don't even remember ever hearing that. Damn.
Yeah. So unbeknownst to the seller,
bad juju. I'd want to get out of that property too, bro. Oh, that's bad juju. Okay, so there you go. So again, the more information you know about the situation, and it sounds kind of messed up, but like you lean into that pain and be like, hey, and so I know that with Kayvon leading the way with the negotiation, he was able to really build that rapport with them, with that tenant, understand where it's coming from. But you gotta be fair but firm. You're not gonna boss me around. You're not gonna punk me. Like, I'm a landlord. I have rights too, and we can go to war, but I'd much rather do this in a peaceful way. And that's kind of the message I have with tenants. Like, hey man, I could be the nicest guy in the world, but I could be a real dickhead if you really push me, because I have rights too, and I have an investment in this property, and we can go to fucking war if you really want to go hard at it. Let's do it. But I don't want to do that. I'd much rather work out something amicably with you. But you can't be afraid to be firm like that, and to be like, hey, this is business. Like, it's not personal. Let's get this thing done. So yeah, and there hadn't really been a lot of talks for cash for keys, but there had been talks of the sale of the property. I think in this situation too. And so, and the property was not in rent control. So like, we didn't have any issue there either. So I think that was, the details of the deal. And then we were able to get them relocated within about, I think 2 to 3 weeks from when we bought the property, right?
That took him about 2 to 3 weeks. He, the other big thing is he had 2 kids, and the 2 kids were in the 2 bedrooms, and this guy was actually just living in the living room. And so he was able to find a better property with better juju and with 3 bedrooms, which, again, just kind of checked a couple of boxes, both for, this guy and getting out of the property. And, again, these were things that just, the current seller didn't want to have those discussions or those conversations. And again, you mentioned it, props to Kayvon for being able to go out there and have those conversations in person with the tenant while he was out there kind of inspecting the property.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. And I want to say one more point to this, guys. So many times these people are in bad situations, whether it's tenants or it's a property you're buying from a seller. There's so many times that I could think about that I know for a fact that this person is going to be moving on to a better situation. So you're doing these people a service. You're helping them out. And it's just, that's the truth of the matter. It's not like, yes, you are an investor, and yes, you are doing, it is a business transaction, but these people are in a bad situation. So wherever they're going off to, it's a fresh start, and more than likely it's going to be much better than where they're currently at.
And that's, more than likely the case with the next property we're going to roll into, right out in Lancaster. Talking about a property that we just recently, as you mentioned, kind of got confirmation that we're going to be able to close escrow on here in a couple of weeks. Now that we were able to resolve the tenant issue, and that's one that, again, if it wasn't for this tenant resolution, we probably would have had a different situation with the seller, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So
exactly.
This one, Alex, a little bit different, right? How long were these guys here in the property out in Lancaster?
Man, forever, since February, right?
Yeah, they've been 90 days since February, and then another 90 days. So these guys, to your point, Alex, they wanted time, not necessarily money, right?
They squeezed everything they could out of it, the situation. Yeah. So in that one, we actually locked that deal up with, the contract said it was going to be vacant. And then the tenants stopped cooperating, which is kind of common. And then the sellers, we have a contract saying we're buying this property, with no tenants, and then the tenants are there. So we were, like you said earlier, given the task of basically negotiating, because the listing agent, it was a smaller purchase price. So she kind of was like checked out, wasn't really that interested in like kind of going out there on a regular basis. Not the best use of, I guess, her time, to be real. And then also, we have one of our partners out there, a real estate agent partner out there, Eric. He's going out there consistently talking to the tenants and building rapport and trying to find out what's going on. But essentially, they just really wanted the time. It wasn't really a money thing. It was like they were just milking it because they needed more time to find a place. And I think they were into drugs, and they were kind of hoarders a little bit. So it's like they're not in a rush to leave or anything. So but yeah, we finally got them out. I think it was just that constant pressure and staying consistent in front of them, like, hey, we can help you out and relocate, and let's get this thing kind of wrapped up. And little by little, they finally got out, because that's basically 5 months, that they kind of extended our escrow. We were supposed to close and buy this house in February, and then now we're going to be closing here in July. But it's because, but the market has, been in our favor. So that's why we didn't cancel the deal too, right? Well, there was plenty of times they were like trying to cancel a deal on us. We're like, no, we're in contract. We're ready to perform, but, we want to keep this deal going. And we even got some of our deposit back, because like they were taking a long time, and we had a $7,500 deposit. We got 5,000 of that back, and so then that way we were still in escrow, but that we didn't have all that money tied up for all the time that they were not paying and then not cooperating, and we weren't able to close on it. But yeah, and then that property was not under rent control, and then there had been talks of cash for keys and whatnot, but they weren't ready to like move yet, and they needed more of the time than the money. And I think we were able to relocate them. We got them out today for $2,800, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is one, again, where, like you mentioned, Alex, it's either, time or money, right? And we had the budget in place for cash for keys on this property of, about 5 to 10K, depending on, what it looked like. And, this was one where it was like, hey, you guys can either get this full amount of money if you get out at the earlier time. And if you don't, that amount of money is going to just kind of dwindle down further and further as we go. And, ultimately for us, it was, hey, is first and last month's rent at their new property going to be, more likely than not worth it for them to get out? And yeah, like you said, the market has been favorable and in this property. So it's better for us to say, hey, let's go ahead and take possession now, get in here and get this thing done, and get some new tenants in. And for these guys as well, good situation, because their current property has a leaky roof, has some issues that need to be fixed, right? And these are things that the current seller didn't want to do. So again, just kind of a breakdown in conversation between a tenant and a landlord. And that's where you can kind of come in and be that third party and be willing to negotiate, right?
Yeah. Because think about how many times you argue with someone and then you don't really want to talk to them no more. But this is like an ongoing relationship. So that's why this happens all the time, guys, where I've seen it time and time again. It's like just one side is beefing with the other side, and one side, oh, you're messing with my rent, my money, my mortgage, and my property. The other side is like, hey man, this is my house. I've been paying you rent. I've been, I've been here and they just like fight. But yeah, so that one, I'm really happy that we got resolution on it, because I didn't want to cancel it, and we stuck to our guns, and now we're going to buy it. So I'm super excited. And it was like a basic deal that might be a double now.
And, again, I think the big concept there was being willing to go into that property where there might not have been as much action on the property because of the tenants in place, again, it just skims down the competition that you're dealing with. Less people are going to want to deal with tenants unless they have that information that you guys are getting right now. So if you guys have any questions on what we're doing, I see a couple of questions kind of coming in through the Q&A field, and we will make sure we get to those as we go along. In the meantime, Alex, would love to kind of talk about Kumalani Street.
Kumalani, yeah, this one has
One that I
been,
know you flew back out to Maui specifically for.
yeah.
One that you kind of mentioned a little bit earlier on the webinar. You got possession of one of the units. So tell us a little bit about this, because this one had 3 separate units on it. It's almost like a triplex, really, because all had separate tenancies. And tell us a little bit, how long were these tenants in the property, right?
Yeah, so one of the tenants, the last one left, it's been in there for 10 years. The other one that just relocated had been there for about 5 or 6 years. The one before that had been there only about 2 years. And you see how that is? The one that had been there the least amount of time was the easiest to get out. The one that's been there a little bit longer was kind of, in the middle. And the one that's actually been there the longest has been the hardest, and I paid them the most money. So that's the way things usually work out. But when we got this deal, part of the reason the guy wanted to sell is because he was a tired landlord. The property is like 3,400 square feet. It's like that's permitted, and then there's an unpermitted, like a studio, we'll call it. And so that's like 3,700 square feet plus 6 bedrooms, 4 bath total on a 27,000 square foot lot. Although the house was built in 1992. I could tell it was just a tired landlord situation where, he's living over in a different state in the Midwest. He's not able to get out to Hawaii as much anymore because he's older. And then he has these tenants that essentially are paying very low rent, not that much. And then he also had somewhat of, I think, a hard money loan that he just came, he had the house paid off, but he needed some money. So he took a hard money loan that was coming due. So there was a couple, pain points there. And so we came in there, we analyzed the situation. I got to walk the property. While I had it, I wasn't able to actually walk the property until I had an escrow. But when I walked the property during escrow, I had to have, I had a one-on-one conversation with all the tenants just to, read them. Really, I mean, this business, you guys, you have to be able to read people, ask questions. That's part of persuasion. That's part of, psychology. All these things that are applicable when you're putting deals together. And I could just tell, that all of them seemed to be somewhat reasonable. I didn't see any of them having to go to court with me. I didn't see any of that like kind of long drawn out. I did see it was going to be difficult, but they seemed like there were, people that I could at least have some type of realistic conversations with. And so I left from that interaction more confident, and I moved forward to buying the deal because I knew that, like, hey, I knew the details, right? How long I had a copy of the lease agreements that they had. They were both on month to month. I got to inspect the entire property. And then, they knew it was being sold. The seller had talked about selling the property for like 6 months to a year with them, but he never found the right buyer. So they had already had in their mind that, at some point in time, they were going to probably have to move out. Yeah. So, that all those things combined, I knew the details, I knew the demographics. I knew it wasn't rent control property. Now there is an eviction moratorium. So it would not benefit me to go through a formal eviction with any of these people. So what I did is I budgeted, 5,000 for the single unpermitted unit. I budgeted 10,000 for the attached legal Ohana ADU unit, and then I budgeted $10,000 for the top unit because I just realized, like, hey, this is kind of what I think it's going to take with all the experience. And so it's $35,000 budget, and that way I don't have to get emotional about, like, oh, that's a lot of money. Well, these people been here for a long time. There's enough profit in the deal. It's just part of the numbers. And so, like, we're on budget, kind of on time. We wanted to have everything vacant by, July, but now we're, a couple weeks late, but we're on budget. So that's kind of how that one's worked out.
And sometimes people just have that number in their head where they're like, hey, I've lived here this long and I've done this much work at the property, like maybe the landlord asked me to fix this or fix that. So, maybe they just feel like they have a little bit of sweat equity built into the place now. And, maybe they just think, hey, this is that number that it's worth it for me to get out. So I know, Alex, you mentioned you just kind of plug those in. What we're going to do next week, guys, on the webinar is we're going to do a deal review. So next week, we're going to actually have Alex kind of jump on the calculator. I don't know if you guys saw his post this week, but, again, we do have that calculator available for you guys in the Facebook group. Just go on there, take a look at that calculator, and next week, Alex is going to show you exactly where we slot in that acquisitions fee, right? That cash for keys, where does that go on the calculator? And that's why Alex is confident buying this property at that price point, because you already budgeted that in, right, Alex? So I
Yeah,
love how you
exactly.
mentioned that. It's pre-budgeted. It's not like this is jumping out of nowhere at you. You knew you had this number in mind.
Yeah, and if you were able to put in the calculator, hey, if I bought it for this price and I have to pay them this and it takes this long, you could calculate the numbers, and now you're making a decision based off real data, not just like your emotions, like, oh, are they going to be hard to get out or not? Hey, man, it's just another negotiation. You negotiate to get the deal, or a deal in the first place. It's just another negotiation. It's like negotiating a short sale with a bank. There's another party involved. It's like negotiating a deal that's in probate. There's lawyers involved. So there's just additional negotiations that you have to encounter as an investor within deals anyway. So the more you get familiar with it, the more experience you get with it, the better investor you're going to become.
So I know we like to kind of talk about the resolution of these properties. So you've got 2 out of the 3. Resolution coming soon on the 3rd.
Yeah, so I'm after this webinar, I'm going over there, signing the agreement, giving them a check for half of the $20,000, and then the other half when they move out on the 16th of this July. So then on the 16th of July, we should have the property vacant over here in Maui, God willing.
And again, I mean, like, that's 3 tenants in one property, each with their own tenancies, each with their own, agreements, each with their own kind of stake in that property. So kudos to you and Alex Ibarra out there for, just continuing to, negotiate with those guys and make sure that, again, they understand that this is your property now, and it's no longer their right to have.
Yeah, and I really couldn't have been finished this or got to this point or anything like that without Alex Ibarra, acquisition director here in Maui. I mean, he's the one that led the charge, got the the lead. We've been working hand in hand on this deal. It's been a team effort. It's been challenging. He was negotiating with the tenants, and then to his credit, he's like, "Hey, man, this is a little bit over my head. I prefer you take over from now." And it takes a certain amount of humility for that, to be like, "Hey, I don't want to mess this up. This is a big deal. Take it over, Alex." And because he didn't want extra stuff on my plate. But then it's just not something he was able to execute. But now it's worked out magically because we're still working together on it. He's helping me more with like facilitating the paperwork and other stuff that like I just don't have time for. And I'm the one negotiating directly with the tenants, and it's worked out. Again, teamwork, guys.
So guys, if I get 10 people on here to say yes, they want to see it, we'll go ahead and pull up a copy of one of our tenant relocation agreements on the webinar right now, and share that in the Facebook group. That way you guys can just see again what this kind of looks like when Alex goes and negotiates. It looks like we're getting a lot of yeses, man. People want to see this. So Alex, when we get done with this 5th and final property, we'll go ahead and pull that up and show you guys what one of these agreements looks like that Alex will have these tenants sign. And we will also keep a copy of that. I'll post it in the Facebook group just so you guys have that as a document and a resource you guys can use in the future. So Alex, I want to talk about one more property. And again, big shout out to one of our tribe members on this one. This is another one that has tenants in it. And this is a property out in La Quinta. So I'll let you tell us a little bit about that deal and what's kind of going on with that one.
Yeah, so the deal was brought to us by Nick Mobley. We understood that was like tenants in place. They hadn't been paying. We looked at the numbers. It looked like definitely was like close because we were budgeting cash for keys. And then I think that the wholesalers wanted like $350,000. And then we came up with our number we wanted to be at 320. I think we settled at 330 buying the property. But I think it was same thing that we've been talking about earlier, where we noticed that like, hey, it was month to month. It's not a rent control property. Looks like it's maybe a little bit older people that are in the property. Looks like there was definitely an issue with the previous seller. And then these people hadn't been paying. And so it was, kind of COVID related, but at the same time, it was issues with, tenant beefing and fighting with the previous seller. I don't remember all the exact details. I just remember like knowing enough of those bullet points and saying, okay, I think we're close. Let me make sure the numbers are there. And then, we had Nick go drive the property, because also if you're dealing with tenants that are not paying and you're going to buy a property, you want to kind of see the condition of the property. Like, is this like super run down and bad condition? These people just like running this place to the ground, or is this like kind of well maintained? And when we drove by the property, it looked pretty well maintained. So usually what the outside looks like, the inside is going to look similar. And so we took the risk and we bought the property occupied, and then Nick was able to walk the property not too long after and open that dialogue, open that communication, and confirm that this, people are kind of, they're realistic. They need about 30 days. They don't really need that much money, and if they do, it's going to be not that much, just a couple grand. And then it's funny. Remember, this is the property you and I will remember. We're coming back from looking at the properties, Antelope Valley. We see Nick's story, and then we see the pool is all blue in the back in his story. We're like jumping for joy, like yeah, because pool equipment.
Nick sends us this message, and he's like, "Yeah, man, the pool, like everything's good." And I mean, the tenant by all means was a great tenant. He had a breakdown with the seller, and again, that's where you can come in and kind of do that. So yeah, Nick said, "I'm going swimming." We're all going swimming.
We're all going swimming in that pool when I get back sometime when we got possession of it. Let's go.
Yes, that'd be cool. And again, on these deals, biggest thing is confidence in it, right? So Nick, we had talked about this last week when we had him on the webinar, and he talked about this deal a little bit. This is something that can be scary for people, right? At first time through it. But if you have somebody in your corner that's already done it, it's the same as everything else, right? You know how to slide when you play baseball, maybe just don't know how to slide head first. But if somebody kind of gives you that coaching, gets a little bit easier. And so, we kind of, just like with, Ibarra out there in Hawaii, it was, a humbling moment. Nick was like, "Hey man, this might be over my head." And it was like, "No, man, this is right where you want to be. You are a real estate investor. You're going to have these conversations. Let's have this conversation with this guy." And to Nick's credit, he's done an excellent job. And I think coming kind of full circle with that resolution, by the end of this week, Nick's either going to go back out there with this agreement that I'm going to pull up and show you guys for this tenant to sign a relocation agreement, or just due to Nick's, absolute swagger and class, this guy might have already just taken care of things on his own and already been able to find his new place and ready to move out. So that's what we're kind of hoping for in terms of resolution there, right?
Yeah, and I'm big on that, Will, with like letting the team take shots, because I can go in there and negotiate. I've done it before, but I want the team to improve. And I noticed that too with letting you guys take the shots, because at the end of the day, like with Joshua Tree, I was confident in Kayvon negotiating that. He was able to do that. We coached him through it. He figured it out, and he's a stud. He got it done. On Kumalani, it was 3 people, and they were like kind of the most difficult that you get. That's why Alex Ibarra wasn't able to do it. It wasn't because he wasn't capable. It was a really tall feat. But we were getting it done. And La Quinta, I also saw the same thing. I'm like, hey, Nick is a stud. I'm sure you could do it, bro. This is the mindset you're supposed to go with. This is the questions. This is the bullet point that we're sharing with you guys. And he went in there, and I'm confident we're gonna have possession of that property by the end of the month as well.
So let's go ahead and pull up a screen share. And Alex, I'm gonna let you just kind of dive through what we're looking at right here. I'm gonna zoom in a little bit so everybody can kind of see. But what is it that we're looking at right here on this screen?
So it's just an occupant relocation agreement. Now, keep in mind, guys, we do also have the one on the California Association of Realtors. We have that form. There's a form for that. We've been using kind of just this a little bit more simple format, because we want to keep it a little bit more simple for the tenant. But you can use both. Every situation is a little bit different, but you could use the same kind of outline. But yeah, it just basically says, hey, we don't love to use the word tenant. We just prefer to use this occupant right now. And then, this is my name, property address. And then you could add to this document just certain bullet points. One of the things that we do is we try to get them to, move out. And then as they're moving out, like same time transaction, you give me the keys, I give you the check. It doesn't always work out that way, because people sometimes are broke, and then we have to, give them money up front. But what I prefer to do is, if possible, just pay the property management company that they're moving to, or the owner they're moving to, directly. And that way they have to sign a lease somewhere else, and they're committed to go somewhere else, and we're paying them directly. So that allows you to have a little bit more control of the situation, rather than just giving them money and then they don't end up leaving. Now in the situation with Kumalani here in Maui, I did have to give them some money up front for this last tenant, because they want to make sure that they can trust me and whatnot. But I mean, the other tenants, I gave them money when they moved out. So exactly, you can just go ahead and structure it and add the bullet points to there. So then that way it's based on that situation. Hey, you move out this day, I'm gonna give you this much money. But all this stuff is kind of already worked out in when you're talking to them in person or on the phone or in text. And then this is just kind of helping lock in what they're agreeing to and what I'm agreeing to, and just put it on paper. And we either DocuSign this or we can have it, wet signatures on it as well. But that's typically what we like to add. Hey, you could leave whatever you want behind. You have to move out this date. 10 agrees to give Alex a high five when they walk out the door. I love that. And so, and then you could stagger the payments, but I usually like to just have it, directly when they're moving out. I joke around and say it's like a drug transaction. Same time, man. Same time.
And I think the big thing there, Alex, is like you said, this is part of the negotiation, right?
Yeah.
So you're able to add these bullet points in as you see fit. If you wanted to make it a half payment, if you wanted to make it a third payment, if you wanted to make it, in your instance, it was individual payments to individual tenants. It wasn't one lump sum with your Hawaii property. It was, hey, each tenant is going to get their respective payment when their respective agreement is completed. And so I think that's a big part of it, right? It is a negotiation.
Yep, it's all a negotiation. That's why I'm saying when you're talking to tenants and you go out there and have those one-on-one conversations in person or on the phone, the conversations are based around the terms of the relocation. And you're basically trying to find out like how much time do they want, how much, if I don't like to say money or like, hey, cash for keys. I don't like to say those terms. What I prefer to say is like tenant relocate. We do have ways to give you tenant relocation assistance. So stuff like that, where just says, hey, and what is assistance? Yeah, I could pay for the moving truck. Yeah, I could pay for guys to help you move. Yeah, I could pay the property management company, your deposit. Those are things that's relocation assistance rather than like, hey, here's cash for keys and they're expecting like this huge lump sum. I just, be careful on the way you, you structure that out or you talk to them about that, or the details of the terms of the relocation.
And here's one, again, where it's pretty simple. It's, like you mentioned, Alex, we're going to agree to pay up to $200 for U-Haul expenses, and that'll happen, via Venmo or Cash App, whatever's easiest for the tenant. So, these things are all negotiable. And guys, I will make sure that I upload a copy of these forms onto the Facebook group so that anybody, can access those. And as Alex mentioned, there's also the CAR form, the California Association of Realtors form. So, Alex, we got a couple of questions. Let's finish off the last little bit of this webinar with a couple of quick fire questions.
Sure.
First one coming in from Jose Alvarez. Where can you find out what the rent amounts can increase by for rent controls? Would Zima have that as well? Or where can you get that info?
That would likely be from like the county. I don't own a bunch of multifamily, so I don't know I don't want to give you the wrong information, Jose, but I would definitely check with the county and the city and the municipality that you're currently in. I know you're over like in Diamond Bar area, so you might be dealing with LA County, also San Bernardino County. But I think easy way would be just to ask other landlords in the area through like forums like the Bigger Pockets forums. If you go on there, create a profile, and you kind of interact with other landlords, you could ask people that. Because people that are active landlords, they'll know those answers. But I think in LA County, I believe it's 3% rent increases most, but don't quote me on that.
And I love what you said there, Alex. Go onto the Facebook group, go onto the forums, find other landlords in your area. I think that's going to be, one of the easiest ways to try and kind of track that info down. Rory's got a great question here too coming in. How much percentage of the rent payment can you give somebody to move out? And when I think of this, Alex, I mean, we've even had situations where, somebody might not have paid rent for the last 5 months. And as the new buyer, you're going to inherit that rent and you can just forgive those rent payments and not even give a percentage of their current rent, right? But really it's as much rent as you want, I would say, right?
Yeah, I mean, that number is all negotiable. Like you can use that as leverage. Don't say, hey, you owe 5 months. I'm going to take you to court for those 5 months past due. But if you move out by, within 2 weeks, I'll forgive you that. And then I'll give you $1,000. So it's already all negotiable. There's no exact percentage. I do usually try to start with a certain number that's around a couple $1,000. But when I started with negotiation with Kumalani and over here in Maui, like I started with $5,000 or 3,500 with the other tenant, and then 5,000 with the other one, and moved that up because like it's a bigger property. They've been there longer, so I didn't want to start like at 2-3 grand. I started like at 5 grand on one, and the other one started at like 3,500.
And again, I think Alex, it's negotiable, right? That's a big piece from there. So guys, you can negotiate whatever works best for you and whatever you currently inherit from that tenant and from the prior seller, right?
Yeah, I got that tenant out in the Compton for $1,000, and that thousand I was padding 10,000 to 15,000 for cash for keys.
So I mean, it just depends on what you can negotiate, and obviously you padded enough. You had the deal right at that 15,000, which would have probably been what 15 months of rent if you couldn't get them out. Bought it in the middle of COVID. You were ready to grind in and hold it if you needed to.
Yeah, it reminds me of this quote, Will. I know we've talked about it before. In life, like in business, guys, you don't get what you deserve. You get what you negotiate. Remember that.
Huge, and that's a negotiation, right? So just like with the seller, these tenant negotiations, it's negotiate what you deserve, not what you want, not what you deserve, right? Yeah. So cool. I think we have a couple other questions and some comments kind of down there in the feed. In the meantime, I'm going to promote some people in here, get some people onto panelist Alex, and we'll kind of close this thing up before we end up. All right.
Yeah, we have a couple more questions to answer though, don't we?
Yeah. Like I said, we'll kind of answer some questions here with the last 5 minutes or 10 minutes or so. Lavisha is wondering about multifamily properties, finding those on the MLS. So those properties that you took down with the tenants, the multifamily, did you find those on the MLS or where did you kind of track those down?
One was MLS, the 4-unit in East LA. The other the other 2 duplexes in Pacoima were both off market cold calling.
Got it. So, obviously a couple of different acquisition strategies there, right? Mm-hmm. Either way, you're getting in touch with a seller that has an issue with their tenant, and you're able to kind of be that mediator and come in and provide some resolution. So another anonymous attendee asking, do you buy in Bakersfield? And if so, for what price range? I know I think for you, Alex, like price range is kind of dependable on the property and, the condition, but really it just has to be below ARV and in need of work to be rehab, right?
Yeah, our business model usually revolves around buying below the median price point for the area. So for example, I know with Bakersfield, we'd probably, average house is going for $300,000. We'd probably want to buy stuff, in the 200, 250 range in those. And now homes more than that, I don't know if I'd want to spend more than that inside of the Bakersfield market. Because then it's going over the median price point. I'm sure there's houses that you could buy at $400,000 or $500,000 in Bakersfield and flip for $600,000-$700,000. But I probably wouldn't want to do that in Bakersfield. I'd probably want to be in the twos, 250, no more than 300,000 in Bakersfield for a single family residence for a flip.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. Mark's got a great question here. He's got a tenant that's been there for 35 years. Rent has never changed. So I'm assuming this guy's still buying, milk for $0.25 down at the store or something. He said that there are some violations on the property. He tried to offer him cash for keys, but the guy wanted $30K. How would you go about that, Alex?
Well, it depends on. I don't think I have enough context to his end play. Like if it's a buy and hold property, then it just depends on how much value is going to be increased by him. Rehabbing that unit, relocating that. I mean, think about it this way. If he gives that person $30,000 and then it costs, say, I don't know, $30,000 to rehab that unit. I don't know what that is. That's $60,000. Now, could he increase the rent by, say, $500, $600, $700 in that unit and then justify that additional cost? Because, that the multifamily, a lot of the value is based on the income. So I just run those numbers and I wouldn't get emotional about it. I'm not saying that Mark is. But sometimes when someone's asking for that much money, maybe you can settle out and give them $20,000 and negotiate down to 20, and then the rehab isn't that extensive, or it is. I mean, they've been 35 years. I would imagine it's a full, overhaul on that unit. So, just how much more income are you going to get on a monthly basis, and how much more is the value going to be increased by that income increase, and then therefore run the numbers. And if it's, it makes sense, then give them the money and get them out.
And Mark, I think the big thing there too is tune in next week, right? Because we're going to go over a deal calculator with Alex, and he's going to literally show you where on that calculator run your numbers as is without the tenant, and then whatever that number is, subtract that extra 30K, and that's your offer.
Yeah.
And say,
Because
hey
he
man, I
could
can
be
get you
increasing
30K as long as the seller takes his deal.
Yeah, he could be increasing the rent by like, $1,000 for all we know, and then I mean that's more than worth it as far as the value of the property to spend the the $50,000-$60,000. Now whether or not he has available the $50,000, because I would imagine after that it would be easier for him to potentially refinance as well. So I'm not a fan of putting dumping $50,000-$60,000 just to get an extra grand, but perhaps he can refinance to get some of his money back out afterwards as well. So who knows? I don't know all the details.
So Alex, one other question we have is about affordable, rental opportunities, right? How do you relocate when there's a lack of affordable housing? And then that's something that our attendee that asked the question is dealing with in Oahu, but obviously we're probably dealing with out here in Los Angeles, Maui for you as well. So how are you kind of dealing with that?
Well, number one, I think that revolves a lot around the mindset of the tenant. Because if they're leaving this amazing unit and then they're thinking they're going to get the same thing for the same price, then you need to get them a reality check. That's what it really comes down to. Like, but there is low price properties in every market and low price rental properties in every market. Now, are they what the tenant wants? Maybe not. And they just need a reality check, and they need to be kind of explained to like what the situation is, because oftentimes the tenant wants to move to a place that's just as big but nicer for the same price, or they want to move, to something that is a lot, the same price but very similar. And it's like, okay, you've been here for 30 years or 20 years. Like, what do you want me to do? Like, but yeah, it really comes down to, I think, to the tenant's mindset, and then showing them the options available. And so much, you guys, has to do about them actually seeing what's out there. So do whatever you can to get them looking, whether that's you sending them listings or you taking them out like a realtor, whatever that is. Like, get them to see what is actually out there for the prices available, and they might be surprised themselves because they haven't actually been looking. And that's what I found with the tenants here in Maui, that when they actually started really looking, they found a lot of options that they liked better than the property they were living at. So yeah,
They're out there. You just have to, again, have that reality check that what you had might not necessarily be what you're going to have. So
yeah, if you're looking for hours and hours every day, you're going to find stuff that is worth you looking at if you're really truly looking to relocate. But a lot of times these tenants, they're not even looking. They're just, oh yeah, I can't find anything. Everything's too expensive, and they haven't even fucking looked. It's like, yeah, bro, because you're not even looking. And it's funny because in Maui, I found a place for rent because I haven't bought a primary residence. I'm not planning on making this like my, I'm not buying a primary residence yet here because I haven't decided if I'm gonna be here permanently or Oahu. But I found a great 2-bedroom, 1-bath apartment with an ocean view, walking distance to the beach for $1,600.
And you did it in like a week and a half looking.
That's because I looked for 2 weeks straight every single day for like an hour, and then I locked up something great. But that's because I put in the work. Same thing.
So I think that's huge. And again, I think it comes down to negotiate, find options, put those in front of those people if they're kind of digging in, and put those options in front of their plate for them. And that's something that we did out in our Lancaster property. Eric, our real estate partner out there, was able to provide a couple of different options for these guys and say, hey, there's options out there. You just have to find them. So the last couple of questions on here, guys, the last one is from Gavin, and he's asking about private money for his first deal. And what I'll suggest for that, Gavin, and everybody else, is if you guys could please go onto the Facebook group. I just posted the link right there in the chat, and let us know. We need your help, guys, to go ahead and figure out what we want to do as our next couple of topics. So we need you guys to let us know what you need help with. If you need help with landlord negotiations, cool. If you need help with getting your first deal, let us know. If you need help with wholesaling, what are the things that are holding you guys back in your business, so that we can go and discuss those and make that happen for you, right? Other than that, I am having a little bit of technical difficulties right now. It's not letting me promote guests into the webinar. It's saying that we're having a error on that. So I don't think we'll be able to end with everybody on screen like normal. But what we'll do is we'll go ahead and get ready for next week. Next week, as I mentioned, we're going to do a deal analyzing webinar. So Alex is going to have the calculator up. Alex is going to be looking over deals. We're going to be talking numbers. You're going to see exactly where we put in cash for keys, when we're negotiating with tenants on these kind of properties. So come ready, come hungry, come with any questions you have. And if you haven't used the calculator yet, please use that link that I just put in the chat. Find us on Facebook. It's the Ask Alex private Facebook group. We'll go ahead and get you added in there if you're not a member yet. Download that calculator and give it a whirl. Put in a couple deals, see if you have any questions, because that's how you're going to get the most out of this next week's webinar, right, Alex? Those, action questions are always better than just random blank questions, right?
Yeah. Let me see. Was there any other questions we didn't answer?
No, we had a question on Gavin about private money for a first deal. And we'll talk about how to kind of get the different lending sources on the deal analyzing next week. So we will get to that question next week. And then it was just a couple of comments just saying, yeah. And Mark was kind of replying back about one of the deals that we did. But other than that, we got all the answers.
Okay, cool. Because I saw another question kind of come in here is, okay, is the All-Star class still open to get training by Alex? One last thing about the All-Star training, guys. If you have already done like a deal or you've already got some experience with investing and you want to be part of the All-Star group, let me know, reach out, for that coaching. Just so you guys know, if you do sign up through me, I actually am an accountability coach. So I would literally be spending half an hour a week with you every single week, as well as you having access to Ryan Pineda, access to all the online courses, everything else. So there's a lot of value to it, but it's only for people that All-Stars is for people that already have some experience, a little bit of experience, either first deal or have something already in the pipeline or have done a couple deals or have some other relevant business and owner experience. But you guys, let's grow the tribe. Let us know if you need anything. I don't have anything else. Thanks again for joining. I appreciate you guys' time.
Yeah, guys, again, we'll see you on the flip side next week. Deal calculator. Come hungry, come with questions. It's going to be a fun one. Alex, do we want to maybe ask anybody in the room if they want to send over a couple of deals, and maybe we'll select a deal or two from you guys? If you send me a DM this week and you have an actual deal that you want us to review, we will do at least one deal from the group. So send me over an email. Again, we're not going to snake the deal, but just be aware that we are going to run that deal and the numbers in front of the group. So be comfortable with that. But if you have something that's close and you just need a little bit of help on it, send me a DM this week, and we'll pick one of you guys, and one lucky person. We'll kind of go over that deal on the call.
All right.
Cool. Let's do it, guys. We'll see you next week. Again, we always appreciate your time. Anybody who's coming back, if it's your first time, we'll see you again next week. And we appreciate all the regulars who keep coming back and learning. We'll see you guys next week.
See ya.
Let's go.